Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the session today. We're focusing on job applications today, so primarily resumes and cover letters, but also just wanted you to have the chance to answer, for me to answer any questions about job applications in general as well. If you do have about application forms and things like that that people often have to fill out. If you've got any questions about key selection criteria and things like that, please feel free to pop any questions that you have during the session into the chat, and then I can address them either as we go or also we're going to have a bit of dedicated question time at the end as well. So for those of you who haven't met me, I'm Belinda and work in the careers team here at Griffith. Mostly at the Gold Coast campus, but also we have heaps of careers advisors based at Nathan, and also online appointments are available to you as well. So if you do want that individual advice and feedback, please do feel free to book an appointment after this, and we can tailor our feedback to your individual circumstances. And firstly, I just wanted to acknowledge the traditional custodians and just pay my respects to elders past and present, and extend that to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. So a little bit of housekeeping. So feel free to introduce yourself in the chat if you like, what degree you're studying, but also would love to hear if you have particular questions about applications or particular concerns that you want to address today. Also, we are going to send you the PowerPoint slides, and so keep an eye out on your Griffith inbox, as hopefully that'll come through today if it downloads in time. So feel free to ask questions, as I said, however you like. Take yourself off mute if you like, if you're more comfortable with chat. Either way is fine. So what we're going to start with is just some key challenges for international students, how to write resume and cover letter in Australia towards Australian standards, and also ideas of what to write if no local work experience or no work experience at all. Apologies as well, there's a bit of drilling on the roof at the moment. We're actually getting some new solar panels installed at in G33. You might have seen the guys on the coast
start looking at some of the action. So,
oh, sorry, I can hear somebody. So hopefully you can hear me, because it's a little bit hard to hear my own voice right now with the drilling, but hopefully that's okay going forward. Please do let me know if there's any issues as we continue, because I can always get some headphones if that might help. Okay, so firstly, just wanted to start with, has there been any particular challenges that anyone has been experiencing? So for resumes, cover letters, any of that kind of application process that you're going through at the moment. And that could be, you know, if you're going for part-time work, perhaps you haven't had a job yet in Australia, or perhaps you're going for professional roles. I'd just love to hear if there's any particular challenges that you're facing at the moment. And as I said, please feel free to take yourself off mute or type in the chat now. So I'll just give you about a minute or so just to type in anything. Go. Oh, I've got the first one. Any standard format according to Australian standards? Standard format. Yeah. Okay, great. Yeah, so yeah, standards for formatting can be so different depending on what country you're from. And often standards are actually different within industries, and sometimes within particular companies, which is really difficult to know, I guess, you know, if you're on the right track or not. What I'm going to go through today is some tips on what is most likely more effective across the board. So I guess when we're talking about resumes, we're thinking about what is more effective than others. So there's not particularly a right or wrong as such, which you've probably worked out, you know. There's not really bad resume, but there is more effective resumes for sure. So the effective resumes will definitely be more particular Australian standards, which I'll run through. I've got a few slides on that as well, with exactly what is kind of most likely accepted across the board. just keep in mind with those individual differences that I spoke about the different industries and things like that. If you're ever not sure, do feel free to reach out to us because we can discuss, your particular industry and the jobs that you're going for. Figuring out how to cover on my cover letter and how to guest connect my past experience to the role I want to apply for. Oh, yes. Okay. So how to incorporate your experience into a cover letter and tailored towards, I guess, is it a different industry for Lynn? Might be a different industry that you're tailoring towards now. And sometimes it's hard to work out how to do that. And we can definitely brainstorm some ideas for you today as well on that too. Great, Wendy. So work experience have from home country, nowhere near to Australian standard. Look forward to getting some tips on how I can compile a resume acceptable here in Australia, especially on my specific field of expertise. Yeah, great. Okay. Perfect. Yeah. And yeah, Wendy, I guess one of the most common things that I hear is from international students is that they feel like their experience isn't very highly regarded from their home countries coming to Australia. And the good news is that's usually not the case. Usually they do really highly regard overseas experience. It just depends very much on the type of work that you're looking for and how you're actually presenting that experience in your application so that employers can really see how your experience in your home country can really cross over to Australian. That makes sense. So yeah, often that's something that comes up, but we can definitely look into some tips and tricks. Okay, great. Another one. Starting a part-time job and lacking local experience, how to effectively craft CV or resume. Sector like aged care hospitality, where I have no prior experience, either my home country or Australia, what strategies I can use to highlight my skills and potential despite the lack of direct experience. Yeah, good question. And I think what you'd have is probably two different resumes. So perhaps one for aged care, one for hospitality. So one of the most important tips about applications is making sure that you tailor it each time. And unfortunately, that's a lot of extra work to do at the time, but it definitely pays off. So if you're going for something in two different industries, which require two different skill sets, then I'd definitely recommend having different versions of your resume. So maybe a master resume with everything on it, and then you pick and choose depending on the job how you want to tailor that. And I think highlighting skills with lack of experience. Sometimes I know somebody else mentioned how to tailor towards acceptable standards. Sometimes what you've got to think about is what are the transferable skills that you have from other areas in your life and how can you draw out from those experiences to make them more relevant to the fields that you're going for. Sometimes in the hospitality and aged care in particular, they're going to require some extra qualifications and things like that, such as, RSA and things like that, which automatically makes it a bit more appealing to have those kind of things on your resume as well. But we'll go through that a bit further too. Thank you, everyone. So I can see a little bit of overlap between some of the questions about the skills and how to highlight those experiences. That gives me a really good understanding of kind of where your questions are lying at the moment. If you do think of anything else during the session, do please feel free to keep typing in the chat and then we can always come back to them as well at the end. So often some of the most common things that employers ask for in Australia is your current CV or resume. So CV and resume are actually very interchangeable words. So if you wanted the formal version, I guess CV is like a longer academic resume. So if you're going for like a research position or something like that, then that's more likely to be a CV. And resume tends to be a shorter, sharper, really tailored version. So ideally a resume should be 2 pages for Australian standards, but you can go to 3 pages if you're quite experienced. Some people find it hard to fit into 2. If that's the case, I definitely recommend to always follow the guide of whatever job you're applying for. So usually they'll tell you if they only want 2 pages, if that's a max, they will actually say that. But if they don't say anything, then 3 pages is the maximum that I'd recommend. I wouldn't recommend to fit it into 1 page, which I see a lot, and it's very, very common for other countries to 1 page, only because often it feels like it's quite squished in. And usually if you're only doing 1 page, it's not quite detailed enough for what a lot of Australian employers want. Cover letter as well. Cover letter is often something that says that it's optional. Often on applications, it'll have a bit of a tick box and say optional, you can attach a cover letter. I would always take that option wherever you get the chance. So even if they don't require it, I would always suggest that you include a cover letter that's really tailored towards the kind of skills and experience that they're asking for. So of course, there's applications sometimes that require other documents instead, and perhaps you don't have the space to include a cover letter. In that case, I would just make sure that your summary at the top of your resume is more detailed and more like a bit of a snapshot of your cover letter if you don't have the capacity to include a whole letter. But we'll go through that a bit further. They're the most common things that you will see that employers are asking for. Some really important points. So resume and application in general is aimed at getting through to the interview stage. So what you want to do is think about how you can make it really readable for employers. Things are really clearly laid out. You've got suitable headings. Ideally, you've got some dot points throughout to make it really easy and really easy to skim and read through. Also, focus on keeping it relevant and recent and tailoring it for the specific job that you're going for. So if you've got previous experience, that's great. I would probably only go back about 10, max 15 years, depending on, your previous history and what you've done. If you have jobs that are relevant past that date, that's okay to still highlight. But generally, I wouldn't go back, 10 years. Not really required because it's not really recent and relevant. Like you've probably got higher skills since then, different, more relevant skills. So an effective resume, so aim for a forward-looking capabilities brief, not a backwards-looking story of my life. So forward-looking. So what does that mean, I guess? It'd be thinking about how to frame it towards the benefits of the employer that you're going for, what you see yourself doing in the future, and how to promote your skills and experience that you've already gained, how that's going to lead to the job that you're going for now, and really focusing in on the accomplishments that you've had, not just focusing on the duties that you've had. So really emphasize anything that you've done and how that's going to carry through to the benefits of the employer. The resume and that cover letter should really be a balance between you and the employer. So if you read through your resume and your cover letter and you realize it's all about what you're going to get out of the experience or all about you, you might think that it's a bit too uneven. So you might want to go back and have a look and see how you can incorporate more of the employer that you're going for into your application as well, which we'll go through. It's very, very common. So if you do have a lot about just you at the moment, very, very common. So don't worry. These are little tweaks that you can do to make it more effective and more likely to get an interview with these particular companies that you're going for. Formatting, just wanted to cover. Formatting is actually really, really important, and it might seem like a really minor thing, but it's actually really important detail. So start having a look around and seeing, what templates are more effective, how you can use white space in your resume. As I said before, it's important not to squish everything in because it makes it less skim readable as well. Try not to have large chunks of text throughout your resume because sometimes if you open it up, you've got large text, people won't read it, and you want to make sure that your content's read. Make sure that it's in the appropriate order. So appropriate order is going to be different depending on what job you're going for. So if you're going for a job that is related to your education, definitely have your education higher up on the resume. Whereas if you're going for a part-time role in hospitality, make sure that you've got your RSA and any relevant qualifications and skills towards the top of your resume. So you can see how it's going to change depending on the target audience that you have, depending on the industry that you have and the specific employer that you're going for. Keyword rich is really important, and that just means having a look at what they're asking for in the job ads and actually cross-checking that you're actually mentioning what you do have from that list. So often they'll have a skills and experience required section. Go under that and just see which parts you do have. So what skills you already do have, what experience you have, and then write that into your resume first, because you want to make sure that when they're reading it, they can actually see how you could potentially fit into this particular role. Obviously, only write what you do have, so don't make it up. But think about what are the most relevant or closely related skills that you do have if you don't have the full list of things that they're asking for. So how are you going to get interviewed by this particular company is really going to depend on how you address their key points of what they're asking for. So let's go into a bit about what to include. So this is the most common kind of sections that we see on Australian resumes. You definitely don't have to have all of these sections, because that would probably be too much if you did have all of these. Definitely have your personal details though, because obviously they need to contact you. Personal details would just be name, email address, phone number, and then often that's it. Name, email, phone number. Don't need address, that's optional. If you do put your address, you might want to think about using it to your advantage. So if you're going for somewhere that's around the corner to your house, it's probably going to be an advantage to put your address on the resume to draw attention to that. But if you're going for somewhere, over half an hour away, it could actually be seen as a bit of a disadvantage if someone, lives around the corner, for example. So you might even want to take it off completely to keep it neutral and to get the employer actually focusing more on the content of your resume rather than some little details that might sway them without them really even realizing that. LinkedIn is often a good thing to put on there if you have your LinkedIn up to date, that is. So if you're active on there, if you've got everything on there that you've done up to date, then I would put your LinkedIn URL, because often employers will actually go to that to see some more details about you, perhaps to see what recommendations you've got, what connections you've got in the industry, things like that. That tends to be more for professional roles and roles that might be related to your field, not necessarily for if it's a part-time job that doesn't really relate to what you want to do long term. Career objective or profile. So this is a really great way to differentiate yourself. So they're optional, but what I would recommend to do is, before where we said forward thinking, so really thinking about how you're going to tailor your resume towards a specific employer. The easiest way to do this is to actually have that career objective at the top and really focused in on that particular employer and what skills and experience you have that directly relate to that place. Also, you're using that promotional language, so that positive language, so things like I'm dedicated and motivated and positive and things like that. Words like that can really help to draw in the employer and get them to continue to keep reading. Career objective can be around 2 to 3 sentences on average, depending on, again, what industry you're in, how much you want to say. But it should really be, ideally, the final sentence should be linking back to the actual job that you're going for. So, for example, really looking forward to obtaining an aged care role with this company. So really, really specific to that organisation. Next section would be anything related to education, and sometimes you can have separate headings. So if you wanted to have a separate training heading, certificates, licenses, professional development courses, I wouldn't have all of these. So again, I would just have the ones that you do have and the most relevant to this that you're going for. Employment history, internships, work experience. So there's some other headings you might want to consider. Key achievements, accomplishments, and skill section. So some people have a skills section as well. You might want to think about how you actually acquire those skills, and providing some specific examples usually works best. Community activities, memberships, journals, conferences, sporting activities, interests, and referees. So as you can see, this is a long, long list, and you definitely don't need to have all of these. I would probably have maybe max 5 or 6 different headings throughout your resume, because you don't want it to be, again, too long, and you want them to spend some time to read it. Some of these sections, so sporting activities and interests, you really want to think about what the industry is that you're going for and how of interest that's going to be to the particular place that you're going for. Often sporting interest is good if you're going for a job in that area, or if perhaps you've got a position such as secretary, or you're a team manager, or some kind of leadership position or something like that within that organisation. That's a good way to explain what you do and the skills that you've acquired from those activities. If you're just having a mainstream interest section, I would try and have, so perhaps something different, to stand out from other people. So, for example, instead of just saying music, you would probably actually say if you're in a band and what kind of music you play, things like that. So you'd go into like a little bit more detail than just writing music, if that makes sense. So a little bit more of your story. And that's what really overall a resume is, your story of what you've done throughout your life that directly relates or might be of interest within the last 10 years to these specific employers. What not to include. So sometimes we see a few red flags in resumes. So I wouldn't recommend necessarily including any of these things. The reason for not putting most of these things on is actually for potential discrimination reasons. And that means, like what I said before with the location. So sometimes when people read these kind of things, they'll make an assumption about you, and then all of a sudden they've made that assumption, and maybe you won't get shortlisted, or maybe they've just gotten distracted, by a photo or something like that, and then all of a sudden it takes away from time that they actually have reading your content, which is really what you want to be assessed on here. You want to get to an interview stage because of your content and because of what you've done, not particularly because of these areas. In saying that, there are some exceptions to this. So, for example, the children. So if you're going for a role where you're going to be working with children, or you've got an organisation where you're at like a school or daycare or something like that, sometimes it's an advantage to highlight that as well, because you have that personal experience. So sometimes these things do come into play, but it probably wouldn't be like its own heading or anything like that. It'd probably just be intertwined, perhaps in the resume, or maybe in the intersection and things like that towards the end of the resume. So languages, what about languages and visa status? So multiple languages is really, really important to highlight. So just think, if you're going for a role where you're going to have customer service, or you're going to have to build client relationships, speaking another language is a huge advantage, because imagine if you've got other clients that speak your language, and there's you compared to other people that might only have English. So make sure that you really think about putting your languages on there and listing them. You don't need to rank, how good you are at certain languages. Just list your languages. That's enough to say. It's really important that employers know how many hours you can actually work. So most of them now have a pretty good understanding of you know, how many you can work on student visa and things like that. But some of them are still not sure. So you just want to make sure that you explain this in some way, and adding that detail, so they have that knowledge. So sometimes what people do is they're working right somewhere on the resume, or perhaps in the cover letter towards the end. So you might want to talk about how many hours you can work in that. Usually I go for more the cover letter because, again, it's not that front and center kind of thing, but it's totally optional which way you want to do it, or if you want to do both, that's okay too. Jose, if your level of language is basic, should you include that language? It's a good question. That's a question I get quite a lot, actually. And I think it really depends on how confident you are. So even if it's basic, so if they saw that language and they asked you to talk to someone in that language, would you be confident enough to do that? I guess that would be the question I'd be asking. If you're really not too sure, you can write basic on there. But I definitely wouldn't put basic as with English, because I've seen that before, and you probably don't want to say that, only because obviously we're going for a lot of English speaking employers. So maybe what you'd want to do in that case is write basic, just in case you get a bit caught out with that one and they start to set you up with specific client calls, not really realizing that your level is basic for that. Now, this is kind of what we were talking about before, tailoring your resume. These are some different ways that you can tailor. So I'm not going to read all this out, but it's basically just where to show certain things. So, you know how we're talking about keywords and phrases before? I would actually intertwine this throughout often your career profile or your career objective that you have at the start, but also perhaps in your skills sections and things like that. So wherever you can intertwine those words in from the job ad, that's always good. Often that will lead to a bit more time spent on the applications, unfortunately. But often that is, I guess, a little bit better to do it that way if you can. So what you might find is that there might be some gaps in your skills and experience. So when you're looking at applications and you're seeing what skills and experience they're asking, perhaps there's a few that you clearly don't have. And that's fine. There's always ways around this and to try and bridge that gap. So if you don't have any experience yet, perhaps in Australia or at all, I would highly recommend to go to this page, which is our Developing Your Employability page, where it goes through a lot of different experiences and networks where you can actually start to gain some skills and some confidence in, see at the top, we've got different schools. So each school have different programs that they do. So you might want to have a look and see what's happening in your schools. In addition to, there's a section where it goes through things like what else you can do to improve your chances, basically improve your chances of getting work. So that's what this whole page is all about. So where to find our mentoring program, where you can volunteer, where you can do internships and things like that. So often if you're finding that you don't have too much experience, often volunteering and internships and mentoring and things like that are the way to bridge that gap a little bit. And then all of a sudden you have experience, even if it's not paid, that's okay. So you can still talk about experience to employers, even if it's volunteering. And also volunteering and these kind of activities are a great way to develop that network and to get some referees as well for when you do go for those professional jobs or those part-time jobs going for. So let's have a quick look at some samples, and obviously it's a little bit hard to see, probably zoom in, especially if you're on your phone. But these are some of our examples. Jennifer Lawrence and Tom Cruise, obviously not their real identities. But have a look here and see the formatting that is used for each of these samples. So you see straight away the formatting is quite clear. There's quite a lot of white space, and they've used a little bit of dot points and also a bit of sentence form. There's slightly different ways to format. So each time they've got the personal details and the name at the top, and each time they have all of the content going right across the page, no columns. So you know how a lot of samples have the 2 columns? It's not the end of the world if you do have a resume that has 2 columns. However, it can make it a bit harder to skim read because you might have conflicting content on both sides, and then often the employer skims left to right. So if they're doing that, it's sometimes a bit hard to focus. See how over here Jennifer's got a summary and then Tom's called it a career objective. They've also both got their locations here, so that's fine, as we said, if it's close to the workplace. Zoe, is it a must to reveal my personal address? Definitely not a must, Zoe. So yeah, you're welcome to just put the suburb if you wanted to, or you're welcome to just leave it off completely. So you don't need to give the whole full address. So see how the summary and the career objective, only a few sentences, very clear, to the point, exactly what they're looking for and what skills and experience they have that relate. They've both got education next, except Tom has actually put a lot of key achievements from his education highlighted. So things that he's done, achievements he's done within his course, that's put there. He's actually got a whole section called university involvement. So if you're part of like clubs and societies and things like that, you're active with volunteering at a university and things like that, you might want to even have its own section. And then Jennifer over here has actually tailored her title to legal experience because she's actually going for roles relating to law, which is what she's studying. So you can tailor your headings to suit you. So sometimes what people call it is relevant experience section, where you get everything that's totally relevant to that particular role, put it in one heading, and then make it on the first page. You want everything that's really, really relevant on the first page because often the employer doesn't read past that. So just make sure that if you do want anything that is highlighted, it would come first, and then the other not as relevant stuff would come after that. So saying legal experience, or if you wanted to say, aged care experience, marketing experience, for example, that really draws that attention to that section, and that shows that you have that relevant experience. And it might have things like university projects in there. It might have volunteering in there. It could have other placements that you've done, things like that. Everything together is one way that you might want to think about it if you've already got a number of other bits and pieces that you've done that relate. So you can see that there's so many different ways that you can do this, but just think about how it's going to work best for you. So if you think about more into career objective and summary, the best starting point for a great career objective is to think about what actually motivates you and what in particular field, what you want to achieve in that field. So then after that, you tailor it towards each particular organisation. So we've kind of gone through that tailoring process, but now I just want to add the layer of that motivation, because often if people are shortlisting into a role, they want to know that this person is really, really motivated to do the job, compared to, someone that just sends a generic resume that isn't even tailored to them. If you can show that you're passionate about this area, that you have the drive and the skills that are required, then, how can the employer really say no to shortlisting you, because they've seen that drive and that motivation through your application document. So really, really work on that motivation piece, and that goes across your resume and your cover letter, I would recommend. So what we've got here is a few samples. So please feel free to have a look once I send you these slides. This is like a basic kind of template you can kind of use if you like these kind of areas. See how they're really specific here, really specific to hospitality, tourism, conservation and rehabilitation, specific ecology knowledge that they have, what kind of skills they have, and then what kind of field they want to develop it into. So what they want to contribute to. And then you can go one step further, and then like here, you can actually say, looking forward to the chance to contribute to the satisfaction of your customers in this whatever role. So whatever role it is that you're going for. So these are just some ideas of how you might want to frame career objective, because often this is actually the part that's the hardest to actually get a bit of a grasp of. I would recommend to do it last as well. So if you haven't really got a resume yet, or you've got maybe an older resume, things like that, I would actually get all of the other stuff ready first, put it all on there, and then start to think about how you want to bring it all together with the objective. We have a whole page on how to build your resume, which goes through all of these different things as well. And see here, there's example resumes. So there's heaps of different samples that you might want to have a look at. And two of the samples that I showed you before, they were some snippets from those. So you can have a look at the full samples over there. I've chosen Jennifer and Tom as the samples because I feel like these are some of the better ones that are on the site. So if you did want to have a look at specific ones, I would recommend having a look at those ones. But there's certainly a lot of others there too you can have a look at. Oh, forgot to mention too, of course, we have a resume checking service if you don't know. So if you did want your resume submitted for feedback online, please feel free to go to this link and then you can submit it for feedback. And it works best if you also upload a job that you're going for as well, so that we can really tailor our advice towards that particular job. You'll get some quick, short and sharp feedback. If you did want to talk after that, you can always book an appointment to discuss further. Right, so before we get into cover letters, I just wanted to check, was there any other questions about resumes that we haven't covered in there? You know, it's always a bit of a whirlwind when we're only doing half an hour on each. Small sports league that we can join in during pastime, can we include that? Yeah, you can definitely, yeah. So if you're in a small sports league, that's okay to include. Yeah, yeah. Are there specific tips for academic resumes? Yeah, academic resume is a little bit different, I guess, in the way that you want to focus more on the research that you've done and specific articles that you've released and things like that. So you probably want to focus usually about 5 or 6 pages still max, I would say. So it's a bit, as you can see, it's a bit longer because you've got so many things to talk about. So you talk about any kind of presentations that you've done. You talk about what is your specific interest area, again, in the career objective. So often the summary at the top will be a little bit longer. So you might want to do 4 or 5 sentences instead of 2 to 3. And you probably also want to have more details about your topic of exactly what you've studied and supervisor and things like that, and you'd have more references at the end. So there are a few differences there. So but yeah, definitely recommend a consult to discuss further if you've got any other questions about your field too. Where can I find the site for sharing CV feedback? Oh yes, Jose, I'll send you the link afterwards with the slides as well, and then you can find it in the slides. It's probably the easiest way to find it. Otherwise, it's just through Career Hub. Career Hub has a link for CV checking. Okay, so cover letters. Feel free to keep the questions coming while we're talking about cover letters. So here are some quotes, I guess. These are some quotes from recruiters. So some say cover letter is just as important as a resume. And also what the cover letter is doing is showcasing your expertise, but it's also showing how well you can communicate. So that's a really important point to think about with cover letters, because actually, if you do a cover letter that has any grammatical or spelling errors, unfortunately, that's one of the reasons that people don't get shortlisted, because in the cover letter, they're actually assessing your attention to detail and your written communication skills. So what I'd highly recommend to do with cover letters is always get someone else to check over it before you send it, and actually read it out loud yourself to make sure it makes sense before you send it, and make sure it doesn't have any errors. Now, the other thing to note is some recruiters read a cover letter first and some recruiters read a resume first. So you want to make sure that they're both equally as good, because you don't know which way it's going to go. When I used to work in recruitment, I actually used to use the cover letter as a bit of a shortlisting tool. So I would actually use it first. I would read it first. And if there was any errors there, or if they didn't seem like, they could write very well and things like that, unfortunately, they wouldn't get to the next level. And often I wouldn't even see their resume, only just due to the volume of applications that I used to receive. Whereas one of my colleagues used to only read the resume. He would never actually open the cover letter. And this was with the same organisation. So it's really interesting how different places work and different recruiters work. As long as they get the goal of who they're going to interview, that's their main goal there. So what I would recommend to do is get both really, really happy with, ready to send as a package, and make sure they feel like they go together as well before you send them out. No need to panic though. I know it can be a bit daunting to have to do all this writing before you submit for each job. No need to panic. I think once you get the foundation there, once you have everything that you want to have in a template, it's quite easy to change it up each time, but you've just got to get it to that stage first. So here's a few quotes from Australian Grad Employers Survey. So these are some things that they actually look for. So looking for understanding of the requirements and how within the organisation, and someone that demonstrates cultural fit. Clear, effective communicator is another one that they said, and clearly demonstrates relevant skills and experiences. Application is tailored to the particular role. So as you can see, there's different things to include, but overall, see how it's the same kind of principles as a resume. So as long as you've tailored it, that's really the most important thing, and you've got relevant skills and experience to go with it. Emmanuel, so yes, usually it would be 1 page for your cover letter unless they've asked otherwise. So sometimes they'll say, address the key selection criteria within a 2-page cover letter, in which case just follow whatever instructions they give you. But if they don't give you a page limit, definitely only go 1 page is standard for cover letter. So within the same survey, they were actually asked what employers say inferior applications look like. So inferior graduates don't do their homework of the organisation and can't demonstrate how they fit. The second one, not attaching a cover letter or following application instructions. And you'd be surprised how common this is. So about 1/3 of applications actually get discarded because they haven't followed the process properly. So they haven't included all the relevant requirements, or they haven't tailored it. Generic and impersonal cover letter that is not addressed to the reviewer. So sometimes it's really hard to get a hold of somebody that is actually the recruiter. And as long as you try, I feel like as long as you try and find out who that person is, that's the main thing. That's kind of all the research that you can do. But I would definitely go to that extra level if you can and try and find out who's the person to address the cover letter to. And I would even try and call them and ask them who's the person to address the cover letter to if you don't know, because that's also a sneaky way to get in and actually get to know them as well. So how to start? So what I would recommend first, read all of the job description, job advertisement, what's required, and also go into some research into the company itself. Because as we said before, it's really got to be a balance between you and them. So you've really got to get a really good understanding of what the company does, what their culture's like, what their mission is, their values and things like that first before you start writing. Because when you start to read all this kind of stuff, you might go, oh, yeah, that really resonates with me. Or, there's a particular part that you've read and you go, oh, that's why I'm interested to apply. If that's the case, that's exactly what you should write in your cover letter as your motivation. So I always say just read through everything and then find something that stands out to you and then pick that as the reason that you're applying to that job. This is one way that you can do it. It works for some people, not for others. So consider through this lens. Some people even do color coding, whatever works for you. So you want to really think about the organizational values, the relevant skills, and the role fit. So what does this mean? So what some people do is actually go through and go, all right, so what knowledge and skills do I need? That's highlighted in blue. What are the values? Like things like self-motivation, focus. What are the role? So what's the role actually entail? So financial markets, specific sales goals, things like that. And then what you want to have a look at doing is doing that throughout other job ads. So that's just another example. So you can start to really see some keywords pop out. So the ones highlighted are really the keywords that I would be intertwining into both of your application documents for anything that you have done or skills that you do have. Lynn, so if I send my CV through email and type out an email to them, can this count as cover letter? Yes, it can, Lynn. Yes. So sometimes what people do is write an email instead of a cover letter. The other way you could do it is attach a resume and a cover letter and just do a very, very short email and say, please find attached resume and cover letter. And sometimes I recommend that only because in a Word document, you can check more thoroughly what format you've got, proper business letter template and format. And you can also check more for spelling and grammatical errors than what you can sometimes in an email. Sometimes it's a bit more harder to see, or if you do write an email instead of an attachment, I'd probably just recommend to start it in a Word doc first, get all that proofing done, and then copy and paste it perhaps in the email so that it's ready to go. So you can do it either way. Okay, so what you want to do, I guess, either way, is start to have a look by either highlighting or skimming through what are the key requirements that the employer is looking for. And then you can start to highlight. So in this case, they've highlighted the skills and requirements in blue. What you really want to do is work out how to match the job ad to the resume. So it's very hard to see this right now, but basically what they've got is the job ad here, and then they've got your resume. And what you want to do is have them side by side and just see how much they feel like they match before you would send it to an employer. This is what I would do too with your cover letters. So see this process and how it works. Some people actually print it off and start highlighting. Some people actually have, if they've got two screens, have one up each screen highlight. Personally, what I do is actually cut and paste from the job ad to resume and to cover letter, and then I gradually take them away, the things when I've addressed them, so that I definitely make sure I don't miss anything and any points to address. So whatever way works for you. Some people use ChatGPT a little bit to make sure that matches. If you do use ChatGPT or one of those AI systems, just make sure that you're still making it personal to yourself, because sometimes it's a bit obvious if you just cut and paste from that as well to recruiters. So just double check that it is really personalized for your motivations and things like that before you submit it. So as I said before, evidence can actually come from so many different areas of your life. So you really want to think about perhaps uni assessments and things that might directly relate to what you're going for. any work integrated learning, work experiences. So really drawing these out so employers can really understand what you have done and what you have learnt. Volunteering and extracurricular activities, and even exchange and overseas travel, all really valuable things that you can put on your resume and in your cover letter, sorry. Really, so I guess these are just some key points. So think about not just tailoring towards that specific role, but thinking about your own career story and how you're going to tell that story in a compelling way. So here are some tips on how to really get through with the emotional side of things, how to make it a bit more personal, because in your resume, you often don't get the time to be that personal. So I think that's why it's really great to be really motivated and show that emotive language within your cover letter, be more personal, and then it really draws them in to your story. And think about, the human side of things. So resume is often just, I've done this, this, and this is what I've achieved. But in the cover letter, you really get to explain why you're really passionate about this area, why are you so dedicated to this particular employer, things like that. So really make your story shine in your cover letter. And if you're not sure of how to do that, we can talk about that in an appointment too and go, okay, how are we going to start? And one of the main questions that I ask people if I'm having a cover letter session is, why are you actually applying? So actually I would ask them, so if I read the cover letter and I don't get a sense of why you're applying, or if it seems a bit trivial, if it doesn't really seem that unique, then I'll dig a bit deeper until we find something like a bit personal or a bit, related to some volunteering that you did, or perhaps what you studied at school or something like that, something that clicks and joins the dots. That's what I would start with and then go from there. So I think the story is just as important as your motivation and also how you're linking it to that employer. So we've got a few templates and things here. So general kind of formatting for your resume so that you can know where to start, kind of how to go, because sometimes it's hard to work out how to actually frame this and how to, how to start really. I'm just going to pop this up. Oops. Yeah, actually this one. This is a general kind of cover letter template, which goes through 4 different sections of the letter. And often it will be 4 to 5 paragraphs. When your cover letter is good, as I said, usually max 1 page, unless otherwise asked for. And this is a general guide of what you would say for each section. This, of course, can be changed around depending on what you're going for and how the flow goes. But if you wanted to start with this is probably a good place to start, and then start to intertwine in all of your details. We've actually got this sample cover letter on our website as well. The link's there. So you can have a look and just make sure you do fill in the details, because I've seen a few that have forgotten to update a few. And make sure when you do fill out the details as well, you still make it your own after you've done that, because obviously otherwise all the students would have the same cover letter. So in here, so it goes through how to match the job advertisement, things like that, indicate your interest, like that. So before, when we're talking about skills that you have that might not be directly related to the job that you're going for, this is when you can intertwine the match into that section. So you can say, talk about experiences that you've had that you've gotten the same kind of skills, even if it's not in that particular industry, but you're showing how those skills actually match to the new industry and job that you're going for. All right, so we've also got so many resources as well on SharePoint if you haven't seen them, so you might want to dig into those, have a look and see. I think overall, the main thing to remember is that there is no right or wrong. However, the more that you tailor these documents, the more effective they're going to be for employers, the more likely you're going to get shortlisted. So we're heading up to question time. So if there is any other questions, please do feel free to type them in now. And I'll just go through a couple more slides with what other resources we have. Career Hub. So obviously that's where you found this event, but there's other tabs and things you might want to have a look at as well with resources, and also jobs tab. If you want a careers appointment to go through your individual cover letter and how to tailor it to certain jobs, please feel free to book an appointment and we can have a chat. As I said, either face-to-face or online, whatever suits you. Probably wouldn't recommend phone for applications in particular though, just because it's a bit hard, obviously, if we can't see the same document in front of us at the time. But yeah, definitely face-to-face is preferred, but either that or Teams, we can share our screen and go together that way. There's heaps of other documents you can have a look at as well. That's one of the checklists, and how to write, different checklists for cover letters, how to identify your transferable skills from maybe another industry into this one. And we've also got stuff on LinkedIn profiles as well. And for those who are postgrad or HDR students in the room today, we actually have a special event coming up that we've just created now. So please feel free to have a look at that and register your place. So some of you might have seen we had the International Student Connected events last trimester. Now we're doing these ones as well. So this is just at the Nathan campus, and it's going to be at Thursday the 31st. There's actually going to be a bit of a session for students first, and then employers are coming, and then you get a chance to network with them as well. So feel free to register if you're interested in that. And we've also got our student recruitment agency as well that you might want to join if you're looking for opportunities either on campus or external as well. All right, so questions. Is there any other questions or anyone else that wanted to take themselves off mute? Do you feel like we've answered all the questions from earlier? I'm just going to double check. I know it's always a bit of a whirlwind. Okay, no worries, Candice, thanks. It's one of those topics that's always hard to fit into the hour, because as you can see, there's so many different factors, and it's going to be different depending on what you're going for, of course, as well. While anyone else is typing, I just wanted to ask if anyone hasn't already done this, I'd love to hear your feedback from this workshop or any other workshops you've attended through us, just because we run these every trimester and we just want to gauge if there's anything we're missing or anything that you particularly enjoyed about the sessions. Please do feel free to let us know. Okay, I don't think there's any other questions, so we might finish up there unless, is anyone still typing? I'll give you another second just in case. Don't want to cut anyone off.
Sorry, I just hello. I just have a question. Could you put back the, I think it's the 42 for the page? Yes, exactly. So you have the QR code.
Yes, there you go. Yes.
Thank you very much.
That's okay, no worries.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. So in Australia, CV and resume interchangeable? Often, yeah. So Emmanuel, I guess some employers say the word CV, but they actually mean resume. It's a bit confusing. I think unless you're going for an academic role, you know, at a university, I would stick with resume as the main way to do it. So I would stick to 2 to 3 pages and keep it shorter and more tailored, just to be sure. Whereas CV tends to be typically CV is a longer, more detailed version, which has a lot of your research and things like that in it as well. But yeah, some employers will actually say CV and cover letter, But if they say CV, just say, yeah, it's resume. Gotcha. All right, great. Thanks everyone so much for your time today and coming along. We hope you've enjoyed the session, and please do feel free to join me. I've got another one on Wednesday for Australian workplace culture. So if you're a bit new to Australia, haven't really worked before in Australia, that's really focused on that session. And then we've also got on Friday, I've got a job interview skills session as well. So Friday at 11 o'clock. Where you can ask any questions about interviews. We're going to go through the different types of interviews in Australia and also how to navigate nerves and things like that. So if you're interested in that side of things, please feel free to join me. Otherwise, have a great rest of your week, and hopefully we'll see you soon at another event. Okay, bye everyone.